This variable reserves some slot or storage in memory, but the size or storage of each slot is not same. These are vary depending on the type of each variable. In our last class, we took this real world entity house as an example to understand Java variable, where we learned that we can declare length, width, height as a variable in Java. This variable reserves some slot or storage in memory, but the size or storage of each slot is not same. These are vary depending on the type of each variable. So what it's mean? So in our last class variable example, we noticed that we use some keyword int, string, and using this keyword we are actually define the type of this variable, like roof type is basically a type string, length type int. Okay, and not only we are defining the type, we are also defining the size or capacity of that variable. Now, when I am telling the size or capacity, so it's actually measure in bit or byte concept. So if it's int, so that's mean its size is 32 bits or 4 bytes. Similarly, if it's a long, then it is basically 8 bytes or 64 bits. Now let's check different type of variables and their size. So in Java, data type are defined in two category, primitive and non-primitive. Primitive data type are predefined in Java, like int, long, these are basically predefined in Java. But non-primitive data type like class, interface, these are basically created by programmer. And except string, they are not defined in Java. Now let's check the subpart of primitive and non-primitive data type. So non-primitive data type are something like class, interface, string. So these are basically some non-primitive data type, and we will learn this class, interface, string all in deep level in later phase. Today we will learn mostly the primitive type, where primitive type are basically defined in two parts, numeric and non-numeric. Now coming to the non-numeric, it is again defined into two parts, one is character, one is boolean. Now if we take the numeric one, this numeric one again divided into two parts, integer and floating point. Now integer are also segregated byte, short, int, long, where floating point is defined in another two type, that is float and double. So when we are talking about this one, so coming to boolean, so this accept, let's say, true and false. Similarly, if it's a character, so it will take a single character. When we are talking about float or double, so these are basically some decimal point representations. And when we are talking about integer, so no decimal are there, but all are basically a whole number. Now each of these has its different size or capacity. So let's check that. So you can see in this table, byte is basically 1 byte. So if our type is byte, its storage capacity is 1 byte. If it's a short, then storage capacity is 2 bytes. If it's a int type, then its capacity or size is basically 4 byte. Now long is basically 8 bytes. So these byte, short, int, long, these four are basically part of integer type. So if you check this integer type, it has byte, short, int and long, and all its size is different. Byte, short, int, long, 1, 2, 4, 8 bytes. Now coming to the next part, which is basically we call a floating point, float and double. Its capacity is float is 4 bytes, where double is 8 bytes. And the next part is basically our non-numeric like character. So character hold 2 byte storage. And boolean itself, it's only considered true and false value. So these are the size of each type. Now what it's means 1 byte 1 byte actually mean, if you check, whenever this we declare any variable like byte, so it will basically take a value range between -128 to 127. So if I declare a value 100, so that's mean byte is enough to declare that variable. But if it's a range between 32,768 minus 2 plus 32,767, in between that, let's say my value is in between 30,000, so that's mean it is good to declare that variable as short instead of byte, because short has capacity 2 bytes and it take the value between these two range. So if our 30,000 under this range, then it is good to you know define that variable type as short. But it is not possible to define that variable under byte because it's a 1 byte capacity and its range is between -128 to -127. So hope you understand that why this type of size is required to understand theoretically, because only to understand that whenever we declare any variable, we have to consider what are the size or range of that variable, and based on that variable's value we can define it in different type. Now coming to the float and double, definitely if it's a, let's say you are doing some currency, should we need some decimal point concept, right? So you cannot make it as a byte, short, int or long, this type of numeric or integer type. This type of integer type if you make, then that's mean you lose the decimal part. So always that type of currency should come under floating point, float or double. Okay, now if you have a flag type of variable need to define, that its value always come yes no concept or true false concept, then you have to define it in a boolean concept of boolean type. Okay, and similarly if you have a single character concept, then you define that variable as a character. So these are basically the concept of different type of data type and their size. Now the question should come in your mind that if byte, short, int, long, everything is basically a integer type. So let's say if I want to declare a variable, let's say age, so I can do anything, right? Byte, short, int or long. So what is the meaning to memorize this type of size, right? So that is because if you are going to declare a age, right? So you know that a man's age always lies between this range. It cannot be a 300 years or 400 years or let's say 30,000 years, right? So it's better if you know that the value of this variable lies between this, so always use that type of variable, let's say byte. So if you declare it as long, then it unnecessary reserve extra space in your memory, right? And that's the reason your executable time of the program will take more time than defining it as a byte. So if you don't have the concept of this storage or capacity of any data type, then you cannot be design your Java code with best practice. As a beginner, when you are coding this type of simple example, so you cannot understand the execution delay. But in future, when you enter in a real world example, there you will face number of issues. So it's better to follow the best practice and the best way for your future coding journey. Let's meet in our next class. I believe this video has helped you to understand about the topic. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, click on the bell notifications and select all so that you don't miss any video from this channel.